It's really lovely to look out there and to just see all these gorgeous faces that have been of those who have worked on the land, that have been shaped by a life outside, of others who are illuminated by a love of the land. This is a gathering of stories and of storytellers. Stories are the way that we make sense out of our lives. They're also the way that we can pass the experience of our lives on. If we don't tell our stories, if they exist at all, they will be told by others who don't understand them.
When I was 4, that was the first time I was allowed to work cattle on my own horse by myself. I've been on a horse since I was 10 days old, but that was the first time I was allowed to be by myself, which just still shocks me. And my parents should be in jail for the things they allowed me to do, including work cattle on a horse by yourself at 4.
It made no difference when we were in the sheep camps that we did not share the same language or shared very little of the same language, because we shared the same life. I remember driving up Benham Mountain to visit the different sheep camps. I was with my daddy, and I was working, and it was wonderful. We would continue to drive and stop and visit and drive and stop and visit, and are we almost there yet? Are we almost there yet? And what I came to realize was that we had been there all along.
My father never expected us to do anything that was beyond our capabilities. 1942, my brothers, with World War II going on, went to service. My dad got sheep herders that had never herded, and they could not keep the sheep together in that kind of terrain. So it was me, go saddle up a horse, gather up the sheep, and take them back to the sheep herder. So one day, I told my dad, if I have to do this, I might as well herd them. Well, guess what? The next morning, he took the herder to town. And I did that for a year.
My father is going to work, and he has asked me to come along. We saddle up and head out for the high country to find a bull missing from the roundup. By the time we find him, sick with foot rot and on the fight, my father's colt has played out and is no longer useful. He stands to the side as I do the hard and dangerous work of getting the bull headed home. The bull tries to take me time and again, sometimes fainting, other times charging. Finally, the bull turns down the trail and limps off like it was his own idea all along. We arrive at a neighbor's corral at dusk after having ridden 30 miles or more. We put the bull in a pen and call my mother to pick us up. A cloudburst explodes just as she arrives, and we slip-slide the gumbo road home through thunder and lightning and blinding rain as my father tells her how we couldn't have gotten the bull out of the hills without me. It's true. If I hadn't been along, he would have come home empty-handed. We both know this, and it makes us feel good.
I see my husband and my son dragging the field, and they have this old Jeep, and I'm thinking, he's got a 2-year-old out there. He's technically supposed to be in a car seat. He's not in a car seat. I know we rolled around in the station wagon. It's okay. But I walk out there, and finally Charlie sees me, and he turns around, and he's coming back at me. And I look very carefully, and I notice that my 2-year-old is bungee corded into this Jeep. And I had to decide what I was going to say, and very brilliantly, I chose not to say anything.
My grandparents have farmed in the Treasure Valley for 100 years. My husband's family owned a ranch in Jordan Valley for 120 years. And my family and my children are the first to not be a part of that. I think that our children are growing up, or at least my children, are growing up without this knowledge, without this connection. And I think it shows in how we treat our planet. And I think it's a big, huge loss.
And it was about midnight, and we looked around, and there's just a red glow everywhere. You can see fire. It looked like a war zone. And I can remember out in the hot, dusty, area where we were, I just got down on my knees and I was praying that the fire wouldn't get our cows, because there wouldn't be anything worse than seeing a cow burned up.
9 years ago, this time of year, my mom was dying of cancer, and she sat in our living room and asked my grandfather if he, at 81, would help carry her casket. And that was one of the few times I ever saw a tear in his eye. And as a man who really grew up with the cycles of the seasons in life and death, he just shook his head and said, "This isn't the way it's supposed to be. Parents are not supposed to bury their children." You know, I've really heard this theme today about, you know, we're all women here, but I've heard a lot about the gentleness and strength of men that have shaped our lives.
"Make a hand," my father hollered when my friends came down to visit. He didn't care if they were men or women when we needed help. "This job's beyond an old man and a crippled girl," he'd say. "Make a hand and drive those yearlings up the chute so we can take them to the sale. Your mother wants new carpet, but I think I'll get a truck." It's been 6 years or better since we closed the box, the narrow casket where he finally took his rest. I added up the debts and stood beside his grave and cussed him hard. I took a deep breath, got a loan, and bought the ranch. And every time I step outside, I hear the echoes. "Make a hand."
Your word is your handshake, and your handshake is your word. And one time in the early 80s, we sold a Grassy Hills, which was our cattle, part of our cattle operation. And my husband and the fellow who bought it, they sat down at the Depot Grill one morning at 6 in the morning at breakfast, and they wrote out the deal on a napkin. And we put the napkin in the safety deposit box and made the transaction, and that was how business was done.
When I was 10, we moved on to the ranch. I got to brand, castrate, earmark, vaccinate, push them up, yell, all the work in the corral, and it was democratic between anybody who could do anything. I never thought about being hampered by being a girl, and that was, I guess, a gift that most women didn't get at that time. So then I grew up, and I got married to a man who's very intelligent and a wonderful sense of humor when he's in a good mood, and he had an idea about labor, the division of labor, which was kind of new to me. I learned how to cook for hired men. They walked in at 6:30 in the morning, 12 o'clock noon, and 6 o'clock at night, and I had to have food on the table. I was told carbohydrates were the best thing. They were cheap, and the men liked them. So I became a pretty good baker of bread and pies. I learned how to kill chickens, pluck them, serve them for dinner. I learned how to build fires on wood stoves. One time I quipped that he ought to have a school for hippies, because it was the 1970s, and that's what they all wanted to learn how to do, all the stuff that he knew how to do that I was learning. He didn't think it was funny.
We had 70 sheep to begin with, and I'm here to tell you that I did not know the head from the tail of a sheep, and it was all woolly, and kind of both ends look the same to me, so this is where I started. But anyway, I've grown my sheep from 70, and now I'm running 3,000 head of ewes in Oregon. Thank you. I'm not a writer, but if I did write a book, I would kind of think I would title it "God Keeps Me Alive for Entertainment."
My dad was the epitome of the West. He visualized it, he was it, he lived it. He was strong, he was intelligent, he was a man of vision and a man of principles. Shoot straight in life, and if you miss, be sure it's because you aimed too high. Your handshake is your word, and your word is your handshake, and never put a price on either one of them. Surround yourself with the best. Whatever you touch in life, try to leave it a little bit better than you found it. There was only one problem. In that set of principles, there was no room for a woman to run a ranch. I went to my parents in the early 90s and I said, I'll buy it. I can buy the ranch. They said, you will fail. I said, I will buy it. And so through workings of agreements in life and who has this and who's got that and what can you do, I ended up and now own the 1,800 acres of the B-Bar B. I have a wonderful life. I thank my dad daily for teaching me the love of the land. I thank my mother for teaching me to hold my head up no matter what the hell was going on and pretend like I knew what I was doing, which is exactly what the hell I've been doing for the last 15 minutes as I stood up here trying to tell you about my goddamn life.
Thank you, all of you, for the breadth of these stories and for their depth, their courage, and their value.